What happens when one dance in a hotel lounge turns into the moment my husband stops arguing and starts preparing? Why did the smile he gave me that night feel colder than anger? How could I call him dramatic when the next time I saw him, he was handing me documents in daylight? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm standing in this hotel lobby, replaying the same moment over and over. Like if I think hard enough, it will somehow make sense. I swear I didn't plan for any of this. One dance, literally one harmless dance in the hotel lounge. And now my whole life feels like it's hanging by a loose thread. People keep acting like I did something unforgivable, but honestly, I was just trying to have a little fun after a long, exhausting work trip. That stranger, Evan, smiled at me like I still mattered, and for a second I liked the feeling. Is that really such a crime? Markus walked in right when Evan spun me. He didn't shout, didn't pull me aside, didn't even look angry. He just watched, face calm, like he was memorizing everything. And then he turned around, went upstairs, and packed his bag without a single word. That silence hit harder than any fight ever could. I tried telling everyone he overreacted, but the more I say it, the more people stare at me like I'm the villain. Maybe I am, but I'm still trying to understand when a simple dance turned into the moment my marriage changed forever. I still remember the low music in the hotel lounge, the warm orange lights, and the way the room felt like it belonged to me for once. I had just finished a long day at the travel conference, shaking hands with people who barely remembered my name, smiling until my face hurt. My feet ached, but I wasn't ready to go upstairs yet. I wanted one moment where I didn't feel like the tired wife who always had to keep everything together. I wanted to feel noticed. That was all. Evan noticed me first. He was sitting near the bar with a drink that looked too expensive for the hotel, wearing a navy jacket with tiny silver threads that flashed each time he moved. He told me he had been working the same conference, that he recognized me from the closing panel. I didn't think much of it at first. He looked friendly, harmless, the kind of man who laughs easily and doesn't ask too many questions. I liked that. When he asked if I wanted to dance, I didn't even think. I just said yes because it felt good to be asked. I kept telling myself it was innocent. The band was playing something slow, but not romantic, and I stood a little apart from him, enough to make it clear it wasn't anything more. But he didn't stand far. He leaned in when he talked, said something about my confidence on stage, how I carried myself like someone important. I know it sounds silly, but those words hit me harder than they should have. Markus never said things like that anymore. He was always so practical, so serious. Hearing someone call me important felt like a warm hand on my back, pushing me gently into a version of myself I liked better. So I let the moment go on. I let the dance last longer than it needed to. I let Evan spin me once because he said I looked like someone who needed a little fun. I even laughed, not loud, but loud enough that a couple nearby looked over. If Markus had seen only that laugh, just that 1 second, maybe he would have understood I wasn't doing anything wrong. But of course he saw everything else. I didn't notice him at first. I was too caught in the feeling of letting myself breathe. But something shifted in the air, like a ripple. I looked over Evan's shoulder and saw Markus standing at the edge of the lounge. He still had his overnight bag in his hand, the strap wrapped around his fingers. He must have come early to surprise me. That thought hit me with a cold drop of guilt even before he walked closer. He didn't say my name. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't interrupt the dance. He just stood there, watching me with that calm, patient face he always used when he was hurt but didn't want anyone to know. His eyes weren't angry. That made it worse. Anger would have been easier to fight. But silence. Silence makes you feel like you're the child, and he's the adult who already expected you to fail. I stepped away from Evan so fast he blinked in confusion. I told Markus he should have texted me that he was early. I tried to sound annoyed, to make him feel like he had walked in at the wrong time, like he should be apologizing to me. Markus just said I seemed busy. His voice was flat, but I heard something underneath. Not jealousy, not rage, something quieter, something that made my stomach twist. I said it was just a harmless dance. He said he didn't ask for an explanation. That line frustrated me so much I almost forgot Evan was still there. Evan said something polite and backed away, disappearing into the lounge like he was never part of it. I didn't even say goodbye. Markus didn't look at him once. We walked to the elevator together, but it felt like we were on two different floors of the hotel. I kept talking, filling the silence with excuses, telling him he was making this into something it wasn't. I said he knew how work events were. I said networking sometimes looked weird from the outside. I even said he should be proud that people noticed me. Proud. Like the dance was some kind of award I earned. He said nothing. Not one word on the elevator ride up. The doors opened, and he walked straight to the room, placed his bag on the bed, and began putting things back inside. I told him he was being dramatic, that he needed to stop acting like some old-fashioned husband in a movie. I reminded him that he always said trust mattered more than appearances. He just kept folding his shirts, smoothing the fabric with slow, steady hands. When I tried to grab his arm, he moved it away gently, the same way he used to move a fragile picture frame when our niece was running around the living room. He didn't even look upset. He just looked finished. That scared me more than anything. He told me he needed space. I told him he was overreacting. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He didn't accuse me. He simply zipped his bag and said he'd take another room for the night. I hated how calm he was. It made me feel like a child who broke something she didn't understand. When he left, I stared at the open door, waiting for him to come back and say he was sorry for making me feel guilty. But he didn't come back. The hallway stayed quiet, as if the whole hotel was holding its breath. I grabbed my phone and called Mira. I told her Markus freaked out over nothing. She laughed and said men get jealous when they feel insecure. She said I should enjoy the attention while I can. For a moment I believed her. It felt easier than admitting I had crossed a line I didn't want to name. But when I hung up the phone, the room felt too big, too cold, too empty. I tried to rehearse the story in my head, the version where I was right and Markus was wrong, where one dance meant nothing. I tried to convince myself he would laugh about this tomorrow. But deep down, even then, even before anything truly happened, I knew something had shifted. I just didn't want to face it. Not yet. Not when I could still pretend the night was just a night and nothing more. The airport terminal felt colder than usual the next morning, even though the heat lamps above the seating area hummed softly. I sat across from Markus at a tiny cafe table, trying to pretend everything was normal. He stirred his coffee without drinking it, eyes fixed on the dark swirl, like he was waiting for something to rise from it. I kept checking my phone, hoping Mira would text me something to make me laugh, something that would prove I wasn't the only one who thought this was all being blown out of proportion. I told Markus we should at least talk before our flight. He said he didn't think there was anything to talk about. That line irritated me so much I almost knocked my cup over. I said he was acting like a stranger who saw a crime instead of a husband who walked in on a dance. He didn't look up. He just said the problem wasn't the dance. It was how easily I explained it away. I didn't like the calm in his voice. It made me feel small. I reached for his hand, but he moved his fingers to the handle of the cup instead. I felt this little sting of embarrassment, knowing the couple sitting beside us saw it. They pretended not to look, but I caught the wife glancing over with that curious, pitying face people wear when they know a relationship is sinking. I straightened my posture, smiled like nothing was wrong, and told Markus he needed to stop worrying about appearances. He said appearances were never the issue. I hated when he spoke in these short, heavy lines. It made me feel like I was the childish one, like I was making drama while he stood there being the calm, rational adult. I said he was punishing me, and he quietly said he wasn't. He was just thinking. Thinking about what? I asked. He didn't answer. My phone buzzed, and I felt a rush of relief when I saw it was my mother. I answered quickly, giving my voice an extra bright tone, loud enough for Markus to hear. I told her we were fine, just dealing with a small misunderstanding. She asked what happened, and I explained the story the way I wanted it told. I said Markus had walked in on a harmless dance and acted like I'd done something terrible. My mother clicked her tongue and said some men have fragile egos. She said a woman being noticed wasn't a sin. I kept my eyes on Markus's face as she said that, wanting him to hear every word. He didn't react, but I saw his jaw tense a little. After I hung up, I told him even my mother thought he was being dramatic. He nodded slowly, like he was filing the information away somewhere in his mind. That bothered me. I wanted him to fight, to argue, to show some feeling. Instead, he just said he understood how I saw it. That was all. Nothing more. Our flight was delayed, so we had to sit there longer than either of us wanted. I tried to lighten the mood, talking about work, the hotel breakfast, the conference speakers. He answered politely, but with distance. At one point, he checked his phone and turned the screen slightly away from me. I caught a glimpse anyway. A calendar reminder glowing in blue letters. Uptown, 3:40 p.m. I asked what it was. He said it was an errand. I said he never made errands that specific. He said maybe he should start. I didn't know why, but that sentence made something twist inside my chest. I told him he was being cryptic, and he said I was reading too much into things. The irony almost made me laugh. When we finally boarded, he let me walk ahead of him. Usually he carried my bag, lifted it into the overhead bin, made sure I was comfortable. This time he didn't offer. I placed the bag myself, feeling strangely clumsy under the weight of it. He sat beside me, arms folded, eyes turned toward the window. I kept talking, trying to fill the space with something other than his silence. I said I understood why he felt strange, but he needed to trust me. He nodded again, the kind of nod people give when they've already decided something you haven't figured out yet. When the plane landed, I expected him to reach for my suitcase like always. Instead, he walked ahead and waited near the baggage carousel. I hurried after him, annoyed at how fast he moved. I asked if we could start fresh when we got home. He said starting fresh required both people wanting the same thing. I told him I did want the same thing. He looked at me then, finally, with this tired expression that made me feel like I had drained every bit of patience he had left. We took a rideshare back to our building. The driver made casual conversation, asking how our trip went. I said it was great. Markus didn't say anything. The driver asked if we were celebrating something. I forced a laugh and said, just work stuff. Markus looked out the window like the city held more interest than anything happening inside the car. When we reached our building, he went straight to the lobby mailboxes and sorted through envelopes like he had somewhere else to be. I stood there waiting for him to say something reassuring, anything. He handed me a small flyer without looking at it and said it was mine. It was nothing, just a coupon for a local restaurant, but the way he handed it to me felt strange, like he didn't want to touch my fingers. Upstairs, I tried again. I told him we needed to talk like adults. He said he agreed. For a second I felt relief, finally, but he only said we should talk later because he needed rest. I said I needed clarity. He said clarity didn't come from rushed conversations. I told him I didn't like being ignored. He said he wasn't ignoring me. He was regrouping. I rolled my eyes and said he made everything sound like a strategy meeting. He didn't comment. He walked into the bedroom, opened his suitcase, and began unpacking, folding everything with that same slow care he had at the hotel. I stood in the doorway watching him. I said he was still overreacting. He said maybe I was still underreacting. He didn't raise his voice once. He didn't insult me. He didn't accuse me. But each quiet sentence felt like a small door closing. I went to the kitchen and texted Mira again. I said Markus was still stuck on yesterday. She replied with a row of laughing emojis and told me I shouldn't let him guilt-trip me. She said husbands always get weird when their wives look good in public. For a moment, her message made me smile. But when I returned to the bedroom, Markus had already placed a pillow on the guest bed. Not sloppily, not angrily, neatly, intentionally. I stood in the doorway with my phone in my hand, waiting for him to explain, to say he just needed one night there. But he simply said he would sleep better with space. I told him space wasn't the answer. He said it was the only thing that made sense for now. His calmness felt like a wall I could not climb. And even though I didn't want to admit it, I felt something cold settle in the room, as if this space he wanted was going to grow wider than the distance between our beds. The family restaurant was louder than usual, full of clinking glasses and children running between tables. The long booth our families had pushed together made everything feel cramped, like nobody had room to breathe. I sat beside Markus, though he left enough space between us for a whole extra person. I tried not to notice, but everyone else already had. My mother kept giving me these tiny looks, like she wanted me to say something that would fix the tension. I didn't plan on fixing anything. I planned on redirecting it. The server brought out drinks, and before anyone even took a sip, Nadine leaned toward me and asked if Markus was still upset about that little hotel thing. Her voice wasn't loud, but it wasn't soft either. The kind of tone that pretends to be private while making sure every person at the table hears. Markus paused mid-reach for the water pitcher, then continued as if nothing was said. That annoyed me. When someone refuses to react, it makes you feel like you're performing alone on stage. I said it was nothing, just work fun. I said some men confuse harmless attention for disrespect. My tone carried, and I knew it. Markus stayed quiet. My mother took this as her cue to add her opinion, saying people today were too sensitive and women were allowed to shine without apologizing. That earned a few uncomfortable shifts from Marcus's side of the family. His sister Iris crossed her arms and stared at her plate. I hated the silence. It felt like judgment, so I filled it. I said Markus was acting like I committed a crime, when all I did was dance. His mother, Linda, raised her eyes just enough to meet mine. She didn't say anything, but her quiet disapproval stung more than if she had shouted. I told myself she didn't understand modern relationships. She hardly left her house. What would she know? Markus finally spoke, but only to ask his sister to pass the salt. Not to defend himself, not to comment on me. Only the salt. I felt something burn in my chest. I wanted him to tell them I wasn't wrong, or that he wasn't hurt, or that we were fine. Anything. Instead, he acted like we were strangers sharing a table by mistake. The food arrived, and conversation turned to weekend plans. I let the silence stretch just long enough before I, casually, brought up the lounge again. I said it with a laugh, like the whole thing was a joke we were all supposed to find charming. I even said Markus used to be fun about these things. That got a few raised eyebrows. Iris set her fork down sharply. She said she didn't see what was funny about humiliating her brother. I said I wasn't humiliating him. He embarrassed himself. Nadine touched my arm, trying to hush me, but I pulled away lightly, smiling as if Iris was being dramatic. Iris said I always made myself look like the victim, and Markus finally looked up. Not at me. At her. He said calmly that it wasn't worth arguing about. Not worth arguing about. That simple line made everyone go quiet. I felt exposed, like he had written a label across my forehead. I forced another laugh, told Iris she needed to relax, told everyone Markus just had a rough week. But the room had shifted. It felt like a spotlight had been turned on, and I was the only one who couldn't step out of it. Across the room, a group of teenagers sat at a high-top table. One girl lifted her phone, angling it toward us. I straightened immediately, smoothing my blouse. I wasn't going to be some sad wife caught looking weak in public. I raised my chin, smiled like I owned the room, and said loudly that people shouldn't take marriage so seriously. I said a little dance, didn't mean anything unless someone wanted it to. Markus's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Linda's eyes dropped to her napkin. Even Nadine gave me a tiny nudge under the table, trying to tell me to stop. But I didn't. I couldn't. I felt like I was winning, like I was taking back the story. When the server refilled our water glasses, I used that moment to lean back and tell the table that Markus had always struggled with jealousy. I said it with a sympathetic tone, like I was the one carrying a burden. The teenage girl across the room was definitely recording now. I pretended not to care. John, my brother, cleared his throat. He asked if maybe I should let it go. I snapped that he didn't understand. He said quietly that maybe I didn't understand either. That irritated me more than anything else. Family is supposed to take your side. Markus's silence made me feel cornered, and now even John wasn't helping. I turned to Markus and said he could at least defend me if he thought I didn't do anything wrong. He looked at me with this calm, almost tired expression and said, "I'm not interested in performing for people." His voice wasn't sharp. It was steady, final. Performing. The word hit me like a slap, though I tried not to show it. I felt heat creeping up my neck, but I forced a smile. I pretended the comment was meaningless, but everyone at that table knew it wasn't. You could feel the shift, like air thickening before a storm. The server arrived with dessert menus, but nobody looked at them. My mother excused herself to the restroom. Markus's mother whispered something to Iris, who shook her head. I stared at Markus, waiting for him to say something softer, something that would pull everything back to normal. He didn't. The moment stretched, heavy and strange. Forks clinked without rhythm, chairs creaked. A child nearby laughed too loudly, like the sound didn't belong in the same room as the tension we were drowning in. I felt like everything was slipping further away the more I tried to control it. I tried one more time. I told Markus he was making a simple misunderstanding look like betrayal. I said he knew me better than that. He didn't answer, not even a nod, just that same stillness. The silence around the table turned into a kind of judgment that no one had to voice. And even though I hated everyone in that moment, Markus, his family, my own, I also felt something new settle inside me. Something like unease. Something like recognition that the ground was shifting under my feet in ways I couldn't name yet. The teenage girl lowered her phone, whispering something to her friends. I stared at Markus again, trying to read him, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking down at the table, as if he had already decided something and was waiting for the right time to act. And for the first time, I felt a small, sharp fear that had nothing to do with Evan or the dance or the embarrassment. It was the fear of watching a man stop trying. The apartment felt unfamiliar when we got home that evening, as if someone had moved the walls half an inch while we were gone. Markus walked in ahead of me, straightening a pair of shoes by the door that weren't even crooked. I watched him do it, trying to read the intention behind such a small movement. He didn't look at me, didn't ask if I wanted tea, didn't say he was tired. He simply placed the shoes neatly and walked into the kitchen. I followed him, annoyed at the quiet. Quiet makes you feel like you're the one who has something to prove. I said we needed to reset the day. He opened the fridge, took out the milk, and said he already had. I asked what that meant. He didn't answer. Instead, he set the milk down with such careful movements that it made me want to knock something over, just to force a reaction out of him. On the counter, 2 mugs waited, his spotless, mine with a faint ring. He placed them on opposite sides, as if they belonged to different households. I told him he was making things bigger than they were. He said he wasn't making anything. He was observing. That word again. Observing. Like I was a case study. I went to the bedroom, wanting space from his distance. But the space followed me. A folded blanket lay at the edge of the guest bed, not thrown or forgotten, placed, deliberate. I asked if he planned on sleeping there again. He said it seemed practical. Practical. I hated how calm he sounded saying it. I told him he was punishing me. He corrected me gently, saying punishment needed intention, and he didn't intend anything. He said he just needed room to think without noise. Noise, meaning me. I could feel irritation building in my throat. I said he had spent 2 days now acting like some wounded saint, silent and noble and above everything, instead of just talking like a normal husband. He didn't rise to the bait. He only asked if talking meant agreeing with my version of events. I said I wasn't asking for agreement, just basic respect. He said respect wasn't the problem. I tried a softer tone. I said he was scaring me a little, that this wasn't like him. He paused at the doorway, not facing me. He said maybe I'd never seen all of him. The sentence stayed in the air long after he left the room. I opened his desk drawer to find his old charger and instead saw a small folder labeled Household. Just paper inside, bills, nothing dramatic. But what bothered me was the tiny click when I tried to close the drawer again. A lock. He locked it the moment I stepped back. I stared at the handle, feeling a mix of anger and something less pleasant. I asked him, since when he locked drawers. He said since privacy mattered again. I laughed because it sounded ridiculous, but he didn't laugh back. He walked past me into the hallway, carrying his laptop. The screen glowed with a spreadsheet, columns with dates, short notes, no labels. I asked what it was. He said it helped him keep track of things. I told him it was obsessive. He said it was organized. I followed him, trying to watch his face, trying to understand if this was all some elaborate sulk or something deeper. He sat on the couch, opened another file, and didn't react when I sat beside him. I leaned close and told him he needed to stop acting like the victim. He said he wasn't acting. I said he was turning nothing into something dangerous. He closed the laptop slowly and asked why I thought the danger came from him. I didn't like the implication. I turned away, pretending to check my phone. My mother had texted again, asking if Markus was still sulking. I typed a reply, saying yes, he was acting childish, and I needed her opinion later. I said it loud enough for him to hear, but he didn't respond. He got up, walked to the laundry room, and sorted shirts with the same care he used for everything now. I went to the balcony and called Mira. I told her Markus was acting cold, organized, distant, like he was building a case. She laughed, told me I was reading too much into things, said men don't build cases, they just brood. But even she sounded unsure when I described how he locked drawers and wrote things down. When I returned inside, Markus was sitting at the table writing something on a small sticky note. I squinted, trying to read it. Bring forms. I asked what forms. He peeled the note from the table and placed it inside his notebook. He said it didn't concern me. That felt like a slap. I told him secrets weren't healthy in marriage. He said neither was public humiliation. His tone didn't change. His posture didn't change. But the words landed with a weight I couldn't ignore. Dinner was silent. The clink of my fork sounded too loud. I said, we should decide how to move forward. He said moving forward required honesty. I told him I had been honest. He said intention mattered more than words. I almost threw my fork, but I didn't. I just said he was twisting everything again. Later, when I walked into the bedroom, he entered behind me and opened the closet. A new key hung from his keyring. A tiny silver one, nothing dramatic, but undeniably new. I asked what it was for. He said storage. Storage for what? He didn't answer. I stood there in the half-lit room, feeling like the world was rearranging without my permission. I tried one last time to break through the calm. I stepped in front of him, told him I loved him, told him we shouldn't let a stupid dance ruin us. He looked at me with a steady expression, not cold, not warm. He said love meant something different to both of us. Then he stepped around me and placed his pillow on the guest bed again. I lay awake long after he fell asleep. The apartment made small sounds. Water pipes, the hum of the fridge, the faint click of his phone receiving a message he didn't check. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the evening, the way he locked the drawer, The careful movements, the quiet sentences that didn't feel like withdrawal anymore. They felt like preparation. The riverside path was crowded with runners, families, and people taking photos of the sunset, but somehow Markus and I walked in a bubble of silence. The kind that presses against your skin no matter how loud the world around you is. I hated that silence. It made me feel shoved to the edge of my own marriage. So I forced myself to start talking, even if my voice sounded thinner than I meant. I said we shouldn't keep dragging this out. I said people fight, people misunderstand each other, and married couples get past worse things all the time. Markus kept walking, hands in his pockets, as if the conversation were floating somewhere above him. I stepped closer so he couldn't ignore me. He slowed, but he didn't stop. I told him I didn't understand why he was treating this like some catastrophic betrayal. It was a dance, a stupid 2-minute dance. He said quietly that it wasn't the dance. It was the way I spoke about it after. The way I spoke about him. I didn't like hearing that. I told him he was twisting my intentions. He said intentions didn't cancel impact. I rolled my eyes so hard it almost hurt. There was a musician on the path playing guitar, and a few people stood around listening. The music drifted between us, making the moment feel even more staged than it already did. I hated the idea that strangers could see us arguing, so I clasped Markus's arm lightly and told him to walk toward a quieter area. He didn't move away, but he didn't lean in either. He just let my hand rest there without warmth. I started explaining myself again, about the conference, about the stress, about needing to feel good for once, about how Evan's attention wasn't real and didn't matter. I said anyone would have understood. He said not everyone excuses disrespect the same way. I told him he was overreacting. He said he was responding. Responding. As if I had been sending signals he'd been collecting this whole time. As we reached a bench overlooking the water, I stopped walking. I said we needed to solve this right now, not drag it into next week like it was some long negotiation. He nodded but didn't sit. Instead, he looked out at the water, the sun hitting the surface in small shimmers. He said he needed clarity too. I asked clarity about what? He didn't answer directly. He said he'd been thinking for days, sorting his thoughts, trying to understand what direction made sense. I felt a pinch of panic, so I shifted my tone, softer, sweeter. I told him I loved him, that this distance was unnecessary, that people would think he was cruel if he kept acting like I had done something intentionally hurtful. He didn't flinch, didn't react. He only said other people's opinions wouldn't decide anything for him anymore. That sentence didn't feel like him. It felt like someone who had already made a decision. A group of co-workers from my building appeared on the path, laughing loudly. One of them, Jenna, spotted me and waved. I forced a smile and waved back. She glanced at Markus, then at me, and her smile faded into something curious. I didn't want gossip spreading, so I looped my arm through his and said loudly that we were just taking an evening stroll. Markus said nothing. Jenna hesitated, nodded, and walked on with the group, whispering to the guy beside her. I pulled my arm back and told Markus he had embarrassed me. He said I had been embarrassed long before she appeared. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, the kind that mixes anger with something closer to fear. I told him he didn't get to judge me for wanting attention when he'd been distant for months. He finally looked at me then, not angry, not sad, just steady. He said he hadn't been distant. He had been patient. I said patience wasn't love. He said sometimes it was. I hated that calm. That calm made me feel like every argument slipped right through his fingers before it could land. I told him he needed to stop acting like he was keeping a private score, like he was waiting to punish me at the perfect moment. He shook his head slightly. He said he wasn't punishing me. He was preparing. Preparing for what? I demanded. For an honest next step, he said. I felt that in my ribs. I reached for his hand, forcing warmth into my voice, telling him we could fix everything if he would just stop holding back. He didn't take my hand. He said we couldn't fix things until we stopped pretending nothing was wrong. I said the only thing wrong was his pride. He said the only thing wrong was my denial. A breeze moved across the river, cold enough to make the hair on my arms rise. I asked him if he wanted to save our marriage or throw it away over something small. He looked at me fully then, eyes calm and clear, and said something I didn't expect. He said he would handle everything properly now. Properly. That word hung in the air like a bell that had already been ringing for days without me hearing it. I tried to laugh it off, tried to make it sound ridiculous. Proper steps. Proper how? What did that even mean? He didn't clarify. He just said he needed a plan, and he finally had one. Then he started walking toward the parking lot, like the conversation had reached its end. I followed him, asking what he meant, asking why he was being so dramatic, telling him he was scaring me for no reason. He only said he didn't want to argue anymore. He said arguing wasn't useful. He said clarity came from action. I didn't understand what any of that meant, but something in his voice made my stomach twist. As he reached the car, he pressed the keys into my hand and told me he would meet me at home later. I asked where he was going. He said he had an errand. I asked what errand. He said it didn't matter. Then he walked away down the path, steady and calm, like a man stepping into something final. I stood there holding the keys, feeling the evening close in around me, wondering why everything suddenly felt like a countdown I hadn't known I started. The lobby of the office tower felt too bright, the kind of brightness that made everything look harsher than it should. I walked in with my shoulders pulled back, ready to finally force Markus to talk to me. He had barely spoken since the walk by the river, barely looked at me that morning, barely existed except in the sound of drawers closing and papers sliding into folders. I told myself he was still sulking, still being dramatic, still trying to get a reaction out of me. I told myself if I met him during his lunch break and confronted him properly, we could finally end this stupid distance. I didn't expect the crowd. A company was doing some promotional event in the center of the lobby, people handing out samples, chatting with employees, laughing. I hated walking into a scene like that. Drama wasn't supposed to happen in public, unless I controlled it. I smoothed my hair, adjusted my blouse, and scanned for Markus. He stood near the elevators, talking to someone I didn't recognize, a woman in a navy blazer holding a clipboard. At first, I thought HR. Maybe he finally wanted us to talk to someone neutral. Maybe he was finally being reasonable. I walked toward them with a confident smile, ready to make myself look calm and composed, ready to show him I wasn't rattled. He saw me approaching, and something in his expression shifted, but not the way I wanted. He didn't look annoyed. He didn't look relieved. He looked finished, quietly, entirely finished. The woman beside him turned as I approached, and she said my full name clearly, without hesitation. I blinked, confused, thinking she must be confirming who I was for some kind of workplace meeting. People around us started paying attention in that casual way strangers do when they sense tension. A few promotional workers paused mid-handout. I said yes, that was me. I asked if she needed something. I tried to sound light, almost amused. She didn't match my tone. She said she was there for a formal delivery. My stomach tightened, though I didn't know why yet. Markus didn't move toward me, didn't reach out, didn't say my name. The woman held out an envelope. It wasn't thick, it wasn't dramatic, just a simple manila envelope with my name printed neatly on the front. She asked me to acknowledge receipt. I laughed a little, confused, glancing at Markus like he should explain why this stranger was playing messenger. He didn't speak. She handed me the papers. My fingers pinched the edges, trying to understand the weight of something that didn't look heavy at all. I opened the flap. The first page slid into view. I didn't understand at first. I read the heading twice before the words stopped looking blurry. Temporary financial and possession orders. Petition for dissolution of marriage. It felt unreal, like the letters weren't arranged correctly. Like my brain was misfiring and inventing a scene I would wake up from in a second. I waited for Markus to say this wasn't what it looked like, that he was making a point, that this was some ridiculous test to show me how I made him feel. But he didn't say anything. I asked him if this was a joke. My voice came out thin and too loud. A few people turned their heads. The promotional staff stopped talking altogether. A receptionist behind the desk looked away quickly, as if she'd intruded on something private, but couldn't escape the view. Markus finally spoke, but his voice was even, almost gentle. He said it wasn't a joke. He said he had thought through everything. He said he didn't want another argument, that this was the cleanest way forward. Cleanest, as if our marriage was something spilled on a counter. I stepped closer, holding the papers out between us, telling him we could talk about this at home. He shook his head. He said talking hadn't helped. He said he'd given me space to show something honest, and I had shown him clarity instead. I asked what clarity meant. He didn't explain. He just said every step he took now was lawful and final. Lawful. Final. I told him he was being cruel. He said he wasn't. He said he was being consistent. I said this was over one dance. He said it was over everything after. People around us tried not to stare, but they did. I could feel their eyes on my face, on the papers trembling slightly in my hands, on the man who refused to look like the villain. I felt small, like every defense I had rehearsed had been stripped away in the middle of a lobby where everyone could see me losing the narrative. I said he couldn't do this out of nowhere. He said it wasn't out of nowhere. He said he had been preparing quietly, so nothing would become chaotic. He said chaos had been my way, not his. I told him he didn't get to rewrite history. He said he wasn't rewriting. It was simply time to put things in writing. I stared at him, waiting for any sign of softness, any flicker of hesitation, any part of the man who once packed my suitcase before business trips and left little notes in the pockets. He didn't blink. He didn't shift. He didn't harden either. He just stood there, steady in a way that scared me more than anger ever could. I whispered that I loved him. He said he hoped I would find someone who matched the way I loved. I said he was throwing everything away. He said he was keeping his dignity. The words felt like a door clicking shut. He turned to the woman with the clipboard and thanked her for assisting. She nodded and stepped back. I stepped forward, trying to reach for him, but he didn't extend a hand. He didn't offer comfort for the shock he had just delivered. He didn't look cruel or triumphant. He looked resolved. He told me someone from his side would contact me with the next steps. Not us. Not we. Someone from his side. I asked him what that even meant. He didn't repeat it. He didn't clarify. He simply stepped around me, walked toward the revolving doors, and pushed one panel forward with a quiet, steady motion. He didn't look back as he exited into the bright afternoon. He didn't pause. He didn't hesitate. His silhouette moved through the glass and out of sight. The lobby felt unbearably still. My fingers tightened around the envelope. The promotional workers began talking again, quieter this time. The receptionist typed something without lifting her eyes, and I stood there, holding the orderly, official end of a marriage I had insisted was unbreakable, realizing too late that silence had never been surrender. It had been preparation.